Hey everybody, welcome back to Dorm Squad Sports, a college sports podcast focusing on Alabama athletics. I'm Dakota. I'm actually without Brian and Oakley. They're back at home for Christmas, and we weren't going to do a podcast, but so much has been happening in college football the past couple weeks, I figured we should put something out. We're going to be talking about Justin Fields deciding to transfer, his options, early signing day just wrapped up. We're going to be talking about it, who we got, who we lost on. Bama basketball has been doing really well. I'm going to pick up on it at the end of the episode. It's going to be pretty short. But before I do any of that, I want to ask you all for a favor. If you could please subscribe to this podcast on Apple Podcasts and leave a rating and comments, just keep in touch with us and let us know what you like, what you want us to do differently. If there's any segments you suggest or things you want us to talk about, we're here to make sure that we're doing what y'all want. So if you could please do me that favor, that'd be really huge for us. But anyway, we're going to definitely focus on Justin Fields to start out this episode because, as most of you know, Georgia backup quarterback, he has decided to transfer from Georgia. He has his options open right now. The three teams that came out as the early front runners are Oklahoma, Ohio State, and Florida State. Another option, he really considered going to Penn State when he was in high school. He decided to go to Georgia instead, obviously. But I'm not really sure if they're a legitimate option now. They haven't been listed. But these are the three main options. And obviously, as an Alabama fan, the outlier that you would want him to go to is Florida State because they are the farthest away from competing for something. And when they're going up against Clemson, the best that they could do would be knock out Clemson. But they are so far away from being in title contention. That would just take a pro player and put him on a team where he's not going to do a whole lot, which if it's his decision, great for him, but that would really help out Alabama fans. Now, the things that are holding him back, and here's why I think Florida State is actually a better option than some people think if you're limiting yourself to these three options. The first thing that's going to make this decision for him is whether or not he'll be eligible next year. And no one knows this yet. If everything goes as normal, he won't be eligible. He'll have to sit out that year, burn his red shirt, and then he'll be eligible. But there's a way to get around it if you have an exemption. And the thing that he'd be trying to get for an exemption is, from what I've heard, Georgia's baseball team, they had some players come out with some racist comments, and that might actually be able to give him like asylum and let him leave without having to sit out a year, which means he could play next season. And either this is guaranteed or the culture at Georgia is worse than we already know, because he had to sit behind Jake Fromm for another year anyways. So his best case scenario at Georgia would be to play a little bit next year, be the starter and the main guy the year after. But because that's not the case, since he's moving, he either has to know for a fact he's going to be able to play next year, which hasn't been disclosed yet, or say, you know what, it's so bad, I would rather leave and start at the same time. So that's a really big decision for him. Maybe that says that he's going to be able to start next year, but we're not really sure. Now, those three teams, first off is Ohio State. That's probably the biggest name in terms of like a brand. And Ohio State's really up in the air about their quarterback next year. Obviously, the quarterback this year is Dwayne Haskins. He had an amazing year, had some highs and lows. And they're, going through a new coaching staff, but they kept a guy on the inside to try to keep players and retain them. A lot of people think Dwayne Haskins might go to the NFL. And we're not really sure yet what he's going to do. He hasn't declared one way or the other what his decision's going to be. But since he hasn't done that, that's really going to make it hard on Fields, because he needs to know if he's going to be able to start next year. He needs to know for a fact that he's going to be starting, or else he's in the exact same scenario he would have been in Georgia. He's obviously willing to compete, but you're not going to compete with the Dwayne Haskins. I'm sorry, that's just not a case. So if Dwayne Haskins decides to stay for at least one more year, then that might be what keeps him from going there, what keeps Fields from going to Ohio State, which I think that'd be good for Alabama fans because it would keep Ohio State from being relevant just a little bit longer, but you never know. The other big one is Oklahoma. Of course, this is mostly because of Oklahoma's offense, and a lot of people have been thinking that with Lincoln Riley, as long as he stays, that he's going to get a quarterback because his style of offense, it's just obvious that you need a high-quality quarterback, and he is the guy you want to go play for. He just makes Heisman winners. He's had back-to-back Heisman winners in his only 2 years of head coaching. That's probably never been done before. He's had a first overall pick, Kyler Murray could be drafted, but he's already going to the MLB probably. And with Kyler Murray leaving, if you can start next year, then there's an opening. The thing holding Oklahoma back is they just signed Spencer Rattler, the number one pro style in the 2019 quarterback class. He was a 5-star, and that might have to be a competition. And a lot of people who leave because they lost the competition aren't really persistent in looking for options where they're going to have to compete for a job, just because you really can't transfer more than once very well, especially if you have to burn your red shirt in that process. But I mean, he might think I'm an obvious better quarterback than Spencer Rattler, but what's holding him back there would be if he has to sit out this year and Rattler becomes the starter next year, which obviously that's a little bit too far down the road to know for sure. But if, let's say, Rattler becomes the starter, now he's in the same predicament, except he's with a guy younger than him instead of at Georgia where he was a guy going into the 2020 draft. So there's a lot up in the air about that. And the big thing with Florida State is DeAndre Francois, their quarterback. Some rumors came out that he might test the NFL market. I'm not really sure why he would, because he's not really ready for the NFL. Another rumor came out that said he might transfer, but he said, or a report came out disputing that. So we're not really sure what's going on there. So I feel like more has to happen before Justin Fields can say in stone, okay, this is the decision, I'm going to stick with it, this is what I need to do. And who knows, maybe someone else comes into the equation. If he can start next year, maybe Penn State, if they lose Trace McSorley, maybe he comes in the equation there. Or I doubt he's going to go stay in the SEC, but who knows, maybe he'll try to go to Auburn. Auburn still has a question at quarterback for next year, and no one really knows what the answer for it's going to be yet. Of course, they have another quarterback coming in the recruiting class, but you'd rather not start your freshman quarterback unless he's just absolute obvious all-star. You'd rather have someone as a veteran to get that season going, especially when they start off with a strong game in the first week. But I'm rooting that he goes to Florida State. I think the best option for him would probably be Oklahoma if he can secure a starting job there. But I think the easiest place to start besides Florida State would probably be Ohio State. So he could really go to any of these three options. I'm going to predict Oklahoma for now, because I honestly think someone is going to transfer to Oklahoma, because Lincoln Riley, he's already had 2 transfer quarterbacks, and we've seen what he's done. One's the starting quarterback for the Cleveland Browns. One's going to be up into the rankings in the MLB, go up the minor leagues, and play in the majors one day. And he's already has a Heisman, Kyler Murray. He could go and play in the NFL, at least get a contract if he wanted to. But like we said, that's still kind of up in the air. Another big thing that's happened since the last time we talked to y'all, early signing day just happened. I think it was a really good win for the Crimson Tide, despite losing on some bigger players. The biggest loss was probably Daxton Hill, because we thought that we had him. He decommitted from Michigan just like a week ago. And I really don't understand this, because I don't understand the thought process behind decommitting from a program and then as soon as you decommit, committing to another program, and then a week later decommitting from that program and going back. I feel like there's just something that we don't really know that's happening with Daxton Hill. Because, I mean, if you're that much in the air, it might have made more sense for him to end up waiting until the actual signing day. Because if he truly doesn't know, if he didn't know, then he shouldn't be making that decision anyways. He should be waiting the next month that he gets. But, I mean, it's his decision. Good luck for him over in Michigan. We'll have plenty of corners and safeties, and we'll be okay without him. We actually got another safety in the class. But, I mean, what you going to do? Another big loss, this happened a couple days before signing day. Kayvon Thibodeau, he was down to Oregon and Alabama, in all honesty. I mean, there were a couple other teams that were in contention, but we all knew that it was a toss-up between Oregon and Alabama. And he decided to go to Oregon. That's another one of those things. He's just going to be a generational talent that it would have been huge if we could have gotten him. but it doesn't really hurt us because we're going to have other talent. It's just a lost opportunity not be able to get him. And another guy, we lost N'Kobe Dean, but I mean that's how it goes. You can't get them all. So we lost, 3 really good players there, which would make our class even better. But even losing them with the class that we signed and who we have hopefully to get when we get into actual signing day, we're still going to be the top class in the nation, and we're still going to have a lot of our team that we have currently going into next year because we're not going to lose as much as we did like perhaps last year. So there's a lot going in Alabama's favor here going into the future. And that's just enough about who we lost. Here's who we got. Evan Neal was one of our top guys. He was a top 5 offensive tackle. He's going to be huge, especially since we're losing 2 linemen next year. And one of them is our left tackle, Jonah Williams. He's going to go probably top 10 in the draft. You never know. He might fall out further. But, of course, we have some people who could be linemen or offensive tackles playing guard right now. Of course, Alex Leatherwood, our current right guard. He's played in the national championship game in that left tackle position. So he might transfer over. But I think it would be better if Evan Neal either slides into that spot now or maybe in a couple years plays that left tackle spot. But, or who knows, maybe we might move Wills over to left and put him on the right. With Tua as our quarterback next year, I think it's more important to protect that right side. But it's just whatever the coaches decide there. But he's definitely a huge get for us. We got a lot of talent on the offensive line this year, and we have enough talent coming back. So that's going to be a really good core in years to come. Another guy we got, a defensive end. I'm probably going to butcher his name, but it's Justin Aboigbe. I probably mispronounced that. I'm not really sure. But he's going to be huge in our defensive line. We're probably going to have to replace all 3 of our starters on the D-line this next year. We're, of course, Quentin Williams in the middle, but even on the ends, it's Raekwon Davis is going to be really hard to replace, and Isaiah Buggs obviously too. Isaiah Buggs has had a really sneaky good year. Of course, everyone's been talking about the middle with Quentin Williams, but Buggs is just a sack machine, and hopefully Justin is going to be able to fill in that role. But, it'll take some time. Of course, we have plenty of depth at the D-line, so he might not play until his sophomore, junior year. But he's definitely, whenever he sees the field, he's going to be a difference maker, so I'm really glad we were able to get him. And another guy that we got that was kind of still up in the air, Brandon Turnage, corner. He'll be really huge. Of course, we're going to probably be losing some people in the secondary, and it's still up in the air as to how the secondary is going to, transition. We have a lot of people moving, and who knows what's going to happen there. We might move some people who are currently a corner over to safety when we lose Deontay Thompson. We're not really sure yet. It's going to, that's going to be a decision made in the spring. But we're kind of weak at corner right now in terms of numbers. So just getting another guy in there who's going to be a lockdown guy is going to be huge for us. And of course, we got 2 quarterbacks who are going to probably be competing for not using their red shirt next year, in all honesty, because we're going to have, honestly, they might both get redshirted, but we're going to have Tua definitely next year. Assuming Mac Jones doesn't leave, we're going to have Mac next year. We might have Jalen. I wouldn't put it past Jalen to either declare for the draft or to transfer, and he has every right to do that. I would 100% support his decision to do that. But either way, we're going to have at least 2 quarterbacks. It doesn't make sense to not redshirt at least one of these guys no matter what happens. Maybe redshirt both of them. And that's going to be a big sign as to who might win a starting job future when Tua declares for the draft. And that's going to be a fun competition in the spring. Of course, Talia Tungavaloa, Tua's younger brother, he started out as an offensive lineman when he was growing up, and then they moved him to quarterback, and he just has a talent to throw that football. And he's also a good dual threat. Of course, transferred to Thompson High School this past year, took him to a state championship game, and actually on the way beat Paul Tyson's team. And Paul Tyson, of course, a descendant of Bear Bryant. That's just going to be a really interesting legacy. It's kind of like an old versus new with, a relative of Bear Bryant with, Tua's younger brother competing against each other. Probably at one point going to be competing for a starting job before they both graduate. And they're both really good. They're high-level players, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Another guy that we got that people aren't going to talk about except for the fact that it's Alabama and we need help at this, Will Riker, the kicker slash punter out of Hoover High School. Only a 3-star because he's on special teams, and special teams guys don't get 4 or 5 stars. But he is an absolute star. He's probably going to be our starting kicker next year. He might even be our starting punter next year because we don't really know what's going to happen there. And Nick Saban has talked about his ability to do both kick and punt the ball. And so he's definitely going to get some reps at it in spring in the 8A game. Expect him to, if he's there, to do well. He probably won't be there, honestly. But whenever he gets on campus, he's going to be a leader in both of those jobs. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. We're still really up in the air as to what our special teams game is going to look like. Of course, it's not looked good in the past few years in terms of kicking the ball. And we still need a replacement for J.K. Scott, honestly, because, I mean, our replacement this year has been okay, but we just don't have that star talent. And even though Reichard is more of a kicker than a punter, it's because he's such a good kicker that we don't talk about his punting ability. If he was a straight-up punter, he would have gone here anyways as a punter. So you never know what's going to happen with him. And probably the biggest guy that we got that we were still up in the air about was Trey Sanders. Trey Sanders, of course, the number 1 running back. He's just an absolute stud. After watching his film, he is so big, but he moves so elusively, and his, speed in the open field just, it's a real shock when you watch him play. So definitely a huge get for us. And I think more than that, also he's honestly has probably the most confidence I've ever seen in an Alabama commit coming, before he even steps on campus. He said he expects to win the Heisman next year, and if not, he's definitely going to be a finalist. Probably not going to happen considering his best case scenario is to be a backup to Najee Harris next year. But, I mean, you got to love the confidence, and you can't win Heismans without believing you can do it in the first place. So good for Trey Sanders on that. But a big thing that also happened with the running back position, Matt Miller, the lead draft writer at Bleacher Report, lead NFL draft scout and college football analyst there. Definitely a huge guy respected in the NFL draft community. When he saw this, he asked if it might push Josh Jacobs out of Alabama because that's just going to make the depth even tougher to play through. And we really don't know what Josh Jacobs is going to do yet. But Josh Jacobs actually replied on Twitter. He's not really active on Twitter, but when he saw this, he replied saying pretty much, no, this is how it always is. We always got some great guys. We compete every day. And he didn't say that he was going to stay, but he said, if I decide to leave, it's not going to be because of some freshman. Pretty much what it boils down to. And I think it's in Jacobs' best interest to declare this year. I agree with Matt Miller on his end goal, which is, Trey Sanders in, Josh Jacobs out. But I think he has it the wrong way around. I think it's more we expected Josh Jacobs to go and declare for the draft this year. And because we expect that, we pushed even harder to get Trey Sanders than we did before. So, of course, we're going to have those decisions made shortly after the season. And he's one of those guys, of course, we talked about him earlier episodes. It would make sense for him to try to leave and try to declare because he could use the help financially. And with the way the running back class is now versus what's going to be next year, it's definitely more favorable for him now. Of course, Taylor, the running back at Wisconsin, is going to be out next year. Swift from Georgia, Najee Harris from Alabama. There's a lot of players that are going to, just fill up the big board at every position. So even if he is, a top 5 running back, which he easily could be, that doesn't mean anything in terms of he's not guaranteed a draft prospect early because it's going to be so many skill players drafted above him next year, and that's just the truth. But the fact that there aren't a lot of skill players available this year, if you need a guy, you got to go get him. And I would personally love to see Josh Jacobs go to the Kansas City Chiefs, playing, of course, they're missing Kareem Hunt now, and playing alongside Patrick Mahomes in that offense, in that system. He would absolutely shine. He's a great pass catcher out of the backfield, and he would honestly, that'd be a plug and play for losing Kareem Hunt. And hopefully, for everyone's sake, hopefully that's the decision made. Of course, we would love to have Josh Jacobs back next year, but you can't keep everybody, and sometimes that's just how it goes. You just lose a guy a year too early. And I think Alabama would be okay if we lost him. Of course, we all respect what he's done, but I think that might be the best decision all around. And like we said, it's going to be up in the air for a little bit. Okay, now we're going to transition to basketball a little bit because Alabama, we were on kind of a tailspin after that upset, I believe, to Georgia State and losing to UCF. And then UCF lost to a couple teams in the SEC and didn't look that good. So that made us look even worse. I actually personally had Alabama down in the SEC rankings. But ever since then, they've been doing a lot better. Of course, the win against Arizona was a really big win. And then this Liberty, that could have been a loss for us. But the fact that we were able to pull that game out, even though we were projected to win that, it was better not to lose that game than it was to win it, honestly, because losing that game would have been detrimental to this season. But we were able to pull that out pretty easily at the end. And Penn State, of course, this was a huge comeback win for us. We don't really have a lot of, I don't want to say we don't have a lot of toughness, but we've struggled in, coming back from huge losses because we usually give up, a lot of points early, and it's hard for us to come back. But we were actually able to do it against Penn State, which is a quality team. This game really could have gone either way, and the fact that we were able to pull it out there at the end was really good for Alabama. And that's going to be our next to last game of the 2018 year. Of course, we have SF Austin still up. That's going to be a tough game for us. Playing at SF Austin is always a challenge. They are one of the toughest environments every year, no matter how good the team is. So if we can get road John Petty to look a little bit more like home John Petty, then we might be able to pull that win out. But it's still up in the air. You never know what's going to happen there. And of course, we're starting out the SEC part of our schedule against Kentucky. And I'm not going to lie, that's probably going to be a loss for us. But if we can go into that game with momentum and look good, even if we lose, that's going to be okay. Because we've never had our season weigh on whether or not we can beat Kentucky. We usually lose to them, but if we can pull out wins in other scenarios like SF Austin, then we can get away with losses like that. In basketball, you're given second chances a lot. And honestly, Kentucky hasn't been as good as everyone expected them to be. Of course, they lost to Duke early. They just had an upset against, I don't even remember, but maybe Mercer? I don't know. But they just had a big upset loss. No, the Seton Hall. They lost to Seton Hall. And that was a huge loss for them because they're not a team that usually handles upsets like that. And they always are known for, struggling until you hit the new year and then hit the ground running. But with as good as the SEC is this year, they're not going to be able just to plow through every opponent they see. They're going to have teams like Tennessee, Auburn, Mississippi State, even LSU that are going to compete with them night in, night out whenever they play. So they're going to need every SEC win they can get if they want to slide into, a top 3 seed in the NCAA tournament. And that includes beating teams like Alabama. So there's a lot more on the line for Kentucky, which is never a good situation to be going into, having more on the line for you than the other team. Because Alabama, assuming, even if we lose to SF Austin, we've got nothing to lose against Kentucky. As long as we, compete relatively well and don't let them just run us out of the gym, it's not that big of a deal if we lose. So you never know what's going to happen there. But, fingers crossed. But as long as we compete well, I think that's all that Alabama can hope for. Another thing, of course, it's Christmas time. I just came out with an article on busting brackets. You can find it there or on Alabama's team stream page. It's 5 items on the holiday wish list for the Crimson Tide. Make sure you check it out. But I'm just going to read through it because I think it's something that all Alabama fans can, listen to and look ahead, because once football season's over, basketball season hits in full stride. But a lot of people don't look at it until football season's over, so it's going to be interesting. A lot of people don't know what's going on until, after they go back to school in January or go back to work in January. So the first thing on the list for the wish list, consistency in games. Even in the Penn State win, we had to have a comeback because we gave up so many points. I think we had to go on like a 22-0 run at one point. It was just Alabama isn't good at just sustaining drives and sustaining, whether it's getting a lead or avoiding a big loss. They have such a big gap between their best and their worst. And I know we can't play our best all the time, but we can't play at our worst at all. And we've really been doing that the past few games. And if we could just avoid that and become a more consistent team, it'll lead to more wins. The next thing, better numbers from the free throw line. Of course, this is a really tough stat for Alabama this year. Probably are the people to get the most free throw attempts for us are Herb Jones, and he's been shooting pretty bad, and Dazon Ingram, who he's been doing okay, but not fantastic. And our best free throw shooter is Kyra Lewis at 83%. That was my stat when I did the article. Of course, it's going to be different now. But at that time, he was only getting 3.3 free throw attempts a game, which means that our worst free throw shooters are shooting it more often than our best. And that's not a recipe for success. You have to have your best free throw shooters attacking and getting to the line. And I know Kyra plays more outside in, but we got to get people fouling Kyra so he can make those shots. And when other people like Herb and Dazon and Dante Hall get to the line, we need them making more shots. The third thing I asked for or put on the Christmas list was a true scorer, because last year we had Colin Sexton averaging 19.2 points a game, and we never really had anyone to back him up with more than 10.6 points a game on average. So that's really a testament to what Colin Sexton did for us. And Kyra Lewis is amazing, but he's not the same player Colin Sexton is. He does more setting up other players than he does for himself, even though he is averaging a solid, I think, like 16 points a game or something. 15.4 when the article came out. But we really expected Herb Jones to step up on offense, and that hasn't happened yet. We also need John Petty to step up a little bit. And even Dante Hall, if we can get some plays that run through Dante, that'll be huge for us. Just, having someone who can get you those points on a consistent basis. Every night we turn to someone new. And that's great because we have a lot of depth who can score. But we need to be able to say, okay, we need this shot. Who are we going to give it to? And I don't know who we give it to at this point. I mean, the numbers say Kyra, but you might also want to give it to Petty because he has the experience. But the fact that you don't know that answer is a tough space to be in. The fourth thing I put on there, and the last two are honestly just jokes because I had to fill it up, a wig for Herb Jones. And here's my thought process behind this. Last year, Herb Jones was doing really well on defense, and he was doing well in transition, having a great season. But this year, the boy cut his hair. And it sounds dumb, but when he cut his hair, he's had a worse year this year, in all honesty. He's not drawing as many charts, even though he's doing relatively well. And his offensive game hasn't grown the way we expected it to. And we don't have enough scorers to be able to put specialists on the floor who can't score the basketball. And he can score okay, but he's not a legitimate, reliable scorer every single game. So that's still out there. And I in the article, I worded it as, like Frosty the Snowman, when he loses his hat, he lost his magic. And it feels like now that Herb Jones lost his hair, he's lost his magic. And we definitely need that magic back for the SEC portion of our schedule. And the last thing I put as another joke, a fake ID for Kyra Lewis, because he's still a child. He's 17 years old, but he's playing in a grown man's league, and he needs to play like a grown man, and he has been so far. But there's still some mistakes that are, high school level mistakes, which you can't blame him for because he's supposed to be playing in high school this year, and he hasn't had the time to grow as a player. But he's got to do that fast, and he's been doing an amazing job, but it needs to step up just a little bit more. Because we need more wins, and we haven't been getting them. The 3 losses, we probably should have won at least one, if not 2 of those games when you look at our 3 losses. But And that's just how it goes. I mean, losing to Northeastern, they just came out, better prepared than we were. The upset loss, I believe, to Georgia State, that just shouldn't happen. I mean, that's just the honest truth, is you don't lose games like that. When you're Alabama at home with momentum and a huge lead, you don't blow leads like that. And we did, and we don't need that to happen. But aside from all that, there's still plenty of hope on this year. There's a lot going on. And I know I've been ranting a little bit, 30 minutes of just me talking. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up this podcast. So make sure you, like we said, subscribe, leave a rating, get involved, follow us on Twitter. Just do whatever you want. Just make sure you stay in contact with us. We'd really love to hear from y'all. And with that said, have a happy week. And we don't have a game. Just have a happy week and roll Tide.